How do I choose if a layover is too long or too short? There's quite a few factors that I consider when I'm booking a flight and looking at the layovers, and we'll go through them here. But the first one I want to talk about is one that I feel like gets overlooked a lot, and that's your personal preferences on how you travel. And what I mean by that is when you're going to have a layover and you need to change planes, what do you need in that time? And no one ever talks about that. What do you need, as in, do you need time to go to the restroom? Do you need time to go get some real food that's not a bag of peanuts or airplane food? Although I guess no one serves peanuts anymore, but you get the gist. Do you need time to go walk around? Maybe you have a mobility uh, thing, like maybe you need some assistance with your mobility in the airport, and that could either be assistance from an airport staff member, or maybe you just walk a little slower than the average person. So that's another thing to consider as well. Or maybe you just want to take advantage of that lounge pass that you have through your credit card. Guilty as charged. Um, Jokes aside, it is something to consider when you're looking at a layover. It's it's just, it just makes a travel day better. It's less stress, it makes you more comfortable, and it's just helpful. I honestly, it's just really helpful. I know for me, there are times where I just need a moment to get off the plane and get reorganized, to get situated, as I like to say. Whether that's going through my bag looking for something that maybe I didn't have out and handy on the plane, or maybe that's putting things back in my bag the way they should be, instead of just like cramming them real quick into my carry-on or personal item as I'm deplaning. So that is the number, no, maybe not the number one thing, but it is definitely one of the things that I do consider when I'm looking at a layover length. Is it too long or is it too short? The next thing I always like to tell people is look at the airport size that you are transiting through. If you're in a tiny little airport, say, first one that comes to mind is Charlotte. I've had quite a few short connections in Charlotte, and it was never a problem. Charlotte's a relatively small airport, and it's very easy to get through. The terminals are connected, for example, which makes it very easy to walk or get on a people mover, and get a little extra pep in your step as you're walking. It's really, really easy to transit through. It's a small airport. But on the flip side, there are big airports where terminals aren't connected. I've talked in a previous video about DFW. DFW is huge. Yes, you can walk through all the terminals if you feel so inclined. They are connected, both by foot and by SkyTrain, but it takes about 45 minutes to get from one end of a terminal to the next, and that is assuming you're not in the one terminal. I think it's like there's like e-gates or something. I would have to look at a map, but there is one terminal at DFW where, I kid you not, you get off the SkyTrain and you have to continue walking to like this arm, and it's oh my God, it's so far, and it adds a lot of time. I've had happen to me once. I made my plane, but I got a little bit cardio in for the day on that one. So that's one example of a larger airport where you need to have a longer layover. Another example would be an airport like, let's say, JFK Airport, where the terminals are not connected. And by not connected, I should also point out, I mean, not connected post security. So DFW, once you're behind security, you're post security, you're airside, you're good to go. You can change your terminals. But some airports you can't do that. So like JFK, for example, they're not connected. So if you're changing from like Terminal 4, which I believe is the Delta Terminal, if I remember at the top of my head, Sapphire Lounge. Anyway, I digress. You could tell where I like to fly through. Or if you're changing to say like the American terminal, which I think is like Terminal 1 or 2. I don't remember. I should know that. I just flew through there a couple months ago. Anyway, all that to be said, if you're changing terminals and you have to go through security again, that's another thing to consider with your layover time. And generally speaking, this happens when you're changing carriers. So if you're going from Delta to American, for example, at JFK, yeah, you have to go back through security. So that's another thing to consider. So it's not only the airport size, but how the airport is laid out and connected. Anyway, enough personal stories. Let me get to the next one. Speaking of security, you also want to consider for layover times whether or not you have to pass customs and border. This can take a very long time depending on where you're at. Sometimes it's super easy to get through customs and border, especially with e-gates these days, electronic, passports. They got a little electronic chip in them. It's so easy. But there's also certain countries still that I've flown through where it takes like an hour plus or 2 hours, and I've had that happen to me when I was in Chile flying out to leave. I think it took me about 2 hours to get through, both lines, both the customs and the border to get to my flight, and that was a similar scenario in Morocco. So, if you are changing airports, do your research and see if the airport you're in, flying into, and then the one you're flying out of, if there is a long time for passing customs and border. And that's not only for getting through the next airport, but also once you get off, how long is it going to take you to enter the country? So that's something that's just, it's a consideration. I will say that I've had good experiences, like when I flown through Buenos Aires and I've had to change airports. Very, very easy, very quick. I've never had an issue or a long wait time in Buenos Aires. They make it really, really simple and straightforward. So when you're looking at times, again, that is another big one is um the customs on the border. If you do have to exit the airport and change to another airport, believe it or not, it does happen. But it's also just a good thing maybe to avoid if possible. And I think one of the other things that you need to look at with layovers really is just their length of time in general. I've talked about it in the past. Another point is like, uh, you know, if you are changing an airport, what is the distance between the airports? It's not just customs and border. It's also, I like to consider the seasons. So if you're traveling in the winter, you may want a longer layover in case flights get canceled or delayed and things happen. But all of to be said, just to kind of wrap this up, decide what is best for you, what you're comfortable with taking, with your risk you're willing to take when it comes to flying. I know for me, I would much rather twiddle my thumbs at an airport than be freaking out and missing a flight or having to reschedule, rebook, maybe getting stuck for a night. So I like to, I guess you could say I'm risk averse. I like to mitigate as much as possible. But I will say there's also times when you look at a layover and you think, I really just don't want to stay that long in one place. I'm comfortable with the risk factors. For example, maybe the airport is a smaller airport, easy to transit through. You're staying with the same airline, which increases the possibility that you just walk across um, the hall to the next gate. I've had that happen before. It's wonderful when it does. And you say, me, they're like 2 short flights. I don't need a lot of time to go to the restroom and relax and repack my bag and get some food. So just, taking your personal considerations, see what's best for you. And sometimes it's like, hey, maybe I want a little longer one because, yeah, I have airport lounge access and I pay for it, so I'm going to use it. Just, yeah, it's personal preferences. In the end of the day, those are just things that I consider based on my experiences that I've had over the past, 20 years of overseas international travel. I've been flying my entire life, which is over 30 years. My first flight was around 6 or 7 months old. So I've flown a lot, and these are just some things I've learned. So I will stop rambling. I hope that was helpful, and I will catch you on the next one.